welcome back to my kitchen. My name's Shannon, and today I'm going to be making a recipe I like to call Almond Pleasure Bites. These are very reminiscent of a popular candy bar that has shredded coconut in the center, an almond on top, and is dipped in chocolate and is full of sugar. What I've done today is recreated that recipe with no sugar but lots of flavor. So to replace sugar, I've used Trim Healthy Mama Super Sweet and Trim Healthy Mama Stevia. And to amp up the coconut flavor, instead of just using shredded coconut, I'm using unsweetened shredded coconut, coconut oil, and coconut milk. And since one almond on the top of the bar just isn't enough almond for me, I use slivered almonds and almond extract to boost the flavor there. I think these would be a great addition to any Easter basket. Let me show you how I make them. First, you're going to add in your shredded coconut. You'll put it into your food processor, but there are two different ways you can do it. If you like your coconut flakes smaller and spread out throughout the whole recipe, you can add them all in now. You're going to use one whole 7-ounce bag, but if your bag comes with more or less in it, just go ahead and measure out a scant cup. So fill up your cup, but not all the way full. So I like mine to have some big coconut flakes and some small coconut flakes. So what I do is put in about half now and save the rest for later. Then you're going to put in 2 tablespoons of coconut oil and 1 tablespoon of unsalted butter. Now, if you only have salted butter, that's fine. Just know that when I put a pinch of salt in later, you'll leave that out. So put in your coconut oil and your butter. Now, if you wanted to use all coconut for extra flavor, that's awesome. You can do that too. I add in the butter though because it gives it just a rich flavor that I enjoy. Now for the sweetener, you're going to add, now this is my preference because I like things sweet, but you're going to add 1 tablespoon of Trim Healthy Mama Super Sweet and 1/32 of a teaspoon, which is called a donk in Trim Healthy Mama, of stevia, I'm sorry. So go ahead and put those in. If you like things a little less sweet, you could either use gentle sweet, same amount, or cut back your super sweet in half. But the little bitty extra amount of stevia is necessary. It does help with the flavor tremendously. Now, for your almond extract, you're going to put in about 2 small squirts. Now, I'll show you something that I do. I pulled off the top here, but a lot of times what I'm going to do is leave on the little silver wrapper that comes with it and take just 1 prong of a fork and pop a hole in it. Then I can squirt them into my recipe rather than having to measure them, and I don't get a whole lot, just a little tiny taste. But here I'm just going to give it 1 little splash, and it's going to equal about 1/4 of a teaspoon. Now if you want more, add more. If you don't love the flavor, don't put it in. I just love that this adds a little bit of extra coconut, almond flavor to the recipe. Now, when it comes to the salt, remember if you used salted butter, don't put this in, but I don't. I use unsalted butter so that I can control how much salt is in my recipes. Just add a pinch. Now, I'm going to put in a little bit of xanthan gum, just a small pinch of xanthan gum. It's going to help the filling of the coconut just stay a little bit thicker and together. Now, my pinch may be different than yours, but I'm just going to say my pinch is roughly 1/8 of a teaspoon. If you put in more, that's okay too. It's just going to be a little bit thicker on the inside of your bar. It's not a big deal. Now, what you're going to do next is use vanilla. Now, this is my homemade vanilla, so it's not completely mellow yet from when I made it, and so it's a little bit stronger, so I'm only going to put in 1/2 tablespoon. Now, that's because I don't want to taste a whole lot of vodka, but regularly I'd put in a whole tablespoon of vanilla because I really enjoy vanilla flavor. But let me go ahead here. Now I'm measuring out this only because it isn't fully mellowed yet. Otherwise, I would just give it a splash and pour until I was happy with the amount. But seeing as this hasn't set in my cabinet, it does have a little bit of a strong flavor and smell still. All All right, so we have added in the sweeteners. We've added in half of the coconut, the almond extract and the vanilla extract, a pinch of salt, a pinch of xanthan gum, the coconut oil, and the butter. What you're gonna do now is pulse these together. And it's gonna be dry and crumbly. That's where the coconut milk comes in. Everyone's amount of coconut milk that they add is gonna be different. You're going to add it until it comes together for you. So let's go ahead. So pulse it. And unlock it and go ahead and look. It is not holding together. And that's the way it's supposed to look. Right now we're just more or less cutting up the coconut and mixing the ingredients. I like to go ahead and pulse it a few more times because the coconut isn't small enough for me. But if you like it larger, you're done right now and ready for the next step. But what you're gonna do is go ahead and open a coconut milk. Now, this is a full-fat, non-GMO coconut milk. I personally have used coconut cream as well, and it was really nice. It made a thicker coconut candy quicker. I didn't have to use as much. Now, when you open your coconut cream, it's going to be very thick. And if you've never used it before, what you won't know is that the thin part of the milk is at the bottom. So you're going to want to take it and kind of puncture down into your can and mix it. We're not using the whole can here, or else I would just say dump it in and let the food processor do its job. But since we're only using a little bit of the coconut milk, then we are going to have to mix it before we add it. If you were going to buy store-bought coconut milk that's in a box, it's not as thick, and this is more like a condensed coconut milk, and the stuff in the box is more like a regular gallon of milk in texture and consistency, that is. But with this, you get a more candy-like texture. With that, it would be a little thinner. But if that's all you have and that's all you can find, that works too. You're just gonna stop putting it in a little quicker than I am because it's thinner and it has a lot more water into it, and so your candy will come together into a ball quicker. Now mine's thicker, so I'll end up having to use just a little bit more. I'm starting to make a little bit of a mess here. But you don't have to mix it great. Just go ahead and mix it well enough that you don't have a lot of liquid still laying on the bottom. So I'm gonna add about 1 tablespoon at a time. And for this small amount, I'm probably gonna stop with about 2 tablespoons total. But there's 1, and I'll pulse it and see how this does. I may stop here, we don't know yet. It's kind of like making a pie crust if you've ever done that. It comes together once you add your cold water. So I'm gonna have to push this down because it doesn't want to mix in. It wants to push up to the sides. Now I'll pulse again. It is starting to come together, but I do think it needs about a tablespoon more. So if you can tell here, it's starting to come together into where I can actually ball it. And you know, I'm glad I took a little bit out because I think I'm only gonna put in about a half a tablespoon more, not a full tablespoon, or it would be too liquidy. So for this recipe, I ended up using about 1.5 tablespoons. You might like it a little thinner. You might like it a little thicker. So you be the judge of how tight you want your candy balls to be. What you're gonna do after this is done is put them in the fridge and let them get hard. So if they're a little bit thin, that's okay too. Just know that we're gonna dip the chocolate on them later, or we'll dip them into chocolate later. And at that point, then they have to be cold. when you take them out to, say, put them in the Easter basket or put them on a platter, they'll start to warm up and get soft. So make sure that you leave them in the fridge for as long as you can before serving them. Go ahead and pulse this again. All right, that's perfect. Now, just know you can always add in more liquid if you need to, but you can't take it back. So don't add too much in the beginning. Be reasonable and put in small amounts, because in the end, if it's too dry, put it back in, add a little more liquid before you take it out and try to roll it into balls. But if you've put in too much liquid and you don't have any more coconut to add to make it thicker, you've messed up your treat and you've turned it into something that maybe can't even be used as candy. So this is coming together. I'm gonna go ahead and put in my almonds, and then if I need more coconut milk, I'll add it then. So I've measured out a half a cup of slivered almond pieces. Now what's gonna happen when I mix this together is it's gonna chop them even smaller. I love that added crunch. What you can even do is add in about a tablespoon or two of uncooked quinoa if you'd like. That little bit of added extra crunch is great, but today I'm just going to use the slivered almonds. All right, it does look like it needs a little bit more of the coconut milk. So I'm going to put in that extra half a tablespoon that I was thinking about putting in earlier and kept out. And I'll pulse it again. Okay, now let's see. All right, I'll call that perfect. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and pull out my center cutting blade, I do not want to get hit by that. I'm going to set it aside. And I'm going to clear up my station and come right back and roll the candy into small bite-sized pieces. Take the mixture out, and with your hands, go ahead and grab small amounts of it and work them into balls. Now, if you really rather them be shaped like bars, work them into a bar. Now, if you make them into a ball, they'll be like truffles. If you make them into a bar, they'll be like candy bars. But since these are for my kids' Easter basket, I'm gonna go ahead and try to shape them into Easter eggs. More of a flat Easter egg, kind of like that peanut butter chocolate dipped candy that you find in the store on holidays that are shaped like holiday treats. I am gonna try to make Easter egg almond pleasure bites. They may not look perfect, but at least they'll look a little more like an egg than a truffle or a bar. Now that the candy's cooling, what you want to do is melt your chocolate. Now, like I said, you can put it in the refrigerator anytime between 1 and 3 hours, but because I wanted this to go really quickly, I put mine into the freezer. It's been in there about a half an hour. Now this is the double broiler method, where I have one pot underneath, a pot that nests inside, and you want to put water in it. Now, you want to put enough water that it doesn't touch the bottom of the pan, yet it also won't boil out while you're cooking. So for my pan, I'm going to use about 1 inch of water. You don't want to have too much, because if the water touches the bottom of the pan, it'll get too hot and it can scorch your chocolate. Now, for this recipe, you can use 85% Moser Roth like I do, or you can use any other sugar-free chocolate. There's Trim Healthy Mama, there's Bake Believe, Lily's. So you're gonna wanna turn the heat on and then hit low. And now that it's on low, that'll be at about 100 degrees. So if you don't have a setting like this or your stovetop, just turn it to low, roughly about 100 degrees. And I'm gonna put my chocolate in. I'm going to use 2.5 bars to start with, and you can always add more chocolate if you need to, but you can't really take it back, and I wouldn't want to melt too much chocolate because that would be a waste. So to get the chocolate to be more creamy, what you're going to do is add about a tablespoon of coconut oil. I got a little bit less, but that's okay. The coconut oil is going to help it be creamier, and it's going to help it harden quicker. So while this is melting in here, you're just going to make sure to keep it stirred. If you don't stir it, it can start to get too hot in hot spots and it can start to scorch. Scorched chocolate is ruined chocolate. Believe me, you cannot get out the pieces that are overcooked and try to use the rest of it. It all tastes scorched and you'll ruin all of it. So keep an eye on it. Don't let it get too hot too fast. And if it is starting to get too hot, don't try just to turn the heat down, just remove it from the heat. So since you have to let the bottom come to a complete boil, this is going to take a little while. While it's working, I'll go ahead and let it do its thing, and I'll come back when the chocolate's melted. The chocolate's melted, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. It's going to take a minute to cool the fan down, and I may need to turn it back on to rewarm it, but for the sake of you being able to hear me better, I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. Now, I have learned that the best ways to dip chocolate is by using a fork. That way the extra chocolate runs out of the bottom of the fork. So I'm going to go ahead and place the candy onto my chocolate, or onto my fork into the chocolate. What I can do is just turn it over and over and dip it through and into there. And when it comes out, put it onto the fork and let it drizzle off the bottom, being careful to scrape off the extra. Place that onto your platter and get the next one. There are a couple different techniques of doing this, but I did just find that if you're not going to use a lot of chocolate all at once and you're only going to do a little bit, by rolling your candy around in the mixture, you get the best coat the quickest. So now we're just going to drip off the extra. I'm going to use a little spatula to scrape it and put it back onto my platter. But as you can see, and I'm going to hold it up here a little bit better, once the chocolate is fresh, it is shiny. And that is when it's wet. It gets dull but the dull is dry and the fresh is shiny. Now, I do know some people like a little bit of salty and sweet. So one thing I have learned is that if you take a little bit of coarse kosher salt, or even a pink Himalayan sea salt, but the kosher salt is a little bit better for this, and sprinkle it right on the top while it's still shiny, you get that salty sweet effect to your candy. Now, I'm not going to do it to all of them, just a couple. I do have one of my sons that likes the salty sweet better than the other. I'll put those in his basket. So I'm going to go ahead and cover the rest of the chocolate. I'll show you a couple in drizzle, and I'll do the rest in completely coat, and I'll come back when I'm done. So the candies have been dipped. I did 4 different techniques. I covered them completely and did a kosher salt on top for that salty sweet effect. I covered them completely and put slivered almonds on top to make a little more almond flavor. I covered the bottom and drizzled chocolate over the top with a spatula, which was actually the hardest for me, or I should say the most difficult to get the drizzle. And then I covered them completely and topped them with nothing special. So there's lots of different ways you could do it, and I'm sure you can come up with even more exciting ways to make them on your own. But I hope you try this recipe, and I hope you love it, and I hope you join me in the kitchen next time for more great recipes. And don't forget to like this channel and subscribe so you can check back for more great recipes. See you next time.